Welcome to Serenity is Addictive, where we explore the benefits of 12-step spirituality in depth. Let's get ready to dive in deep into this next episode. Ori.
What's up, brother? Can you hear me?
Yeah, man.
You can hear me loud and clear?
I can.
How you doing?
It's good to do this, man. I'm excited to have you on our show and talk a little bit about the show you're going to do. And I heard your first episode, and I thought it was really cool. And this podcast, Serenity is Addictive, basically, once we taste some of the peace that comes from living this way, the 12 steps,
right?
If we really taste it, we want more of it, right?
Right.
I think.
Right.
And I think, and I heard in your first episode, you said something, and I heard Lindsay say it as well. Like, we turn over not just whatever the addiction thing is, but we learn to turn over everything,
Right.
and
Yep.
little by little, imperfectly, of course.
Yep.
And sometimes that's the hardest thing. And when I heard your first episode, like, what I got out of it, man, for me, was like how cunning my ego is,
Mm-hmm.
and how, like, I heard you say some things that were very humble.
Mm-hmm.
And it just, another guy told me one time, he said, he said, when I'm like, not, when I have my will and I'm not living this way, he's like, I can even sound eloquent, I could even
Right.
be doing good things,
Right.
but
Yep.
it's not like real, right? Like, something's off.
Yep.
Yeah. And I
Yep.
love what you said too about the big book, like using the so-called good things, like compassionate, kind,
Mm-hmm.
like, Ori, how you doing?
Yep.
But I'm really trying to get my will. I'm trying to sell you something, and dude, like, so I have an addictive personality. I have multiple addictions, but underneath it all is that ego,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
that thing. I'm more powerless over that. Well, I'm just as powerless over that than the things that it contributes to, like those addictions, right?
Right.
And I'm blind to it. I am blind to it. So it's good to even know that, because sometimes I can even forget that, and that's scary. When I don't know that I'm susceptible to
Yep.
that,
Yep.
that's when it's really
But
scary,
that's delusion, right? That's what delusion is. You don't know.
Right.
You don't know that you're in it. So, and that's kind of, we talked about, you asked, what do I have a topic I'm inspired by? And,
Yep.
at the time I didn't have one. And then this morning, I was, my lady, she had an experience at work, and it was just a minor disagreement or just miscommunication with her boss. And on Friday, her boss told her, he was like, I want to have a meeting with you on Monday.
Mm.
And, she was absolutely convinced that, she said, she was like, oh, I'm going to get let go.
Mm.
And this is like a new role for her.
Mm.
And she was just absolutely convinced over the weekend, like, she was going to be let go. And she suspected maybe her thinking was a little bit off, but really it was fact for her. Like, this was going to happen.
Mm.
And then today rolls around and she has the meeting and she says, oh, I was in full flight from reality. And that's something that we talk about a lot, and it just really hit me how many, how many situations, how much of my life, how much of my actions have been dictated by me just making up something, believing that it's fact, and acting upon that, right? Like,
Mm.
how many just complete falsities, right? Like, not even true, not based on any fact, like stories that I've just made up about people, circumstances, and life. Have I, like, just acted on non-truths?
Mm-hmm.
And, like, a lot of my life has just been dictated by that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And you talked about that ego, like, and it just brought me back. I think we talked about that in my podcast. Like, just, we're driven by 100 forms of self-delusion, fear, self-seeking, self-pity, right? Like, that's what's circulating in my subconscious, right? And that's what's driving my decision making. That's what's
Mm-hmm.
impacting my life. Like, how much of that is going on? And you talked about that awareness. Like, I don't even see it.
Mm-hmm.
I don't even
Mm-hmm.
see when I'm just making up like just a complete fantasy or a falsehood. I don't even see it.
Right. 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 But you know what's interesting, man? I'm starting to feel it in my body.
Mm-hmm.
Like, even like, I don't know, man, like it's very interesting. I'll tell you this, man. I was sharing with someone, and by the way, I want to just announce. So the name of your podcast is Not Another Big Book Study.
Yeah, so yeah. So the so with me and my lady is we're gonna do not another big book study where we're focused on, the big book and the steps and our experience with that.
Mm,
But the overarching, it's going to be like a trauma, but it's just going to be another trauma baby podcast. Like that's the kind of name I'm tossing around right now, that
mm.
all of our, or my whatever. I don't know how it's all going to work out, but it's all going to fall under the umbrella of trauma baby. But with
I
me and
love
my
that,
lady, we're
dude.
typically doing not another big book study.
I love that. And I heard that in your first episode. Tell me
Yeah,
about,
yeah.
if you don't mind, tell me about that name, Trauma Baby. Like that's pretty cool. Like how'd you come up with that? Why did you like tell me why is that significant to you, or why did you use that name? Or yeah.
So in this recovery, I don't know where I got this from, but early in my recovery, like I would, it was like my mantra to
Mm,
protect the baby. And
mm,
and that's how I looked at my, my sobriety.
mm,
I looked at it as if it was a baby. Like,
mm,
I didn't want to take any major trips, because you don't put a baby on a plane in the first year, right?
mm,
You don't take a baby on a long drive. You do
mm,
everything you can. You wrap that baby up in clothes when it goes outside. You protect the baby at all
mm,
costs.
mm,
And that's the way I looked at my recovery, is like protect
mm,
the baby. Sometimes I had to go to sleep early because I didn't want to use. That was protecting the baby, right?
mm.
I had to eat the right things, protecting the baby. So I looked at it like that. And also, when I was a kid, I was just told I was really sensitive.
Mm.
I'm sure I'm not the only addict that was told that they're really sensitive.
Yeah.
And so I looked at myself as, I was just like a sensitive baby.
Mm,
And then, of course, in today's times, like that T word is thrown around a lot, and that big T word of trauma. And when I put those two together, just something about that just rang, trauma
mm.
baby. Like, what is it's just really catching. So that's how I
Yeah.
came up with that name. Yeah.
Beautiful. Beautiful. I
Yeah.
love it, man. I love it. And I'm so glad I asked you because yeah, I think it's cool the way you said like treating the sobriety like a precious baby that you got to protect.
Yep.
And
Yep.
I don't know if you're familiar, there's a 12-step program called ACA. It's Adult Children of Alcoholics and
Right.
Dysfunctional Family.
Right. Right.
Yeah. And so in that program, they say like the solution is to become your own loving parent. And when you talked about what
Mm-hmm.
you said, it kind of reminded me of that because it's like I got to protect myself from
Mm-hmm.
like from in some ways my ego and from my I gotta and I also got a good visual like when we start this thing
Mm-hmm.
like because I thought of the big book and there's one part that says like don't try to like hide in the closet or something like that. It's like basically like or like if you suppress it will come back even stronger. But
Right.
what
Right.
I heard from you, like that's not right away. Like just like when we learn how to walk, when we learn this thing, we got to grow in it, right?
Yeah,
Like
absolutely.
it takes
Absolutely.
time to get there, right?
Right.
Yeah, and I want to go either too fast or too slow, and it's like God's timing is like, I had a sponsor, he said like you got to let go of the timing of when you're going to get the miracles, how they're going to come. Just stay in the simple action business, and do what you need to do. And dude, one in particular, like when you said you didn't take trips, there was one particular program I was in and I couldn't get any traction.
Mm-hmm.
And a wise sponsor, after having a bunch of sponsors and me always going back to the addiction, he said, like, I was like, oh, I'm gonna go visit my family. He's like, no, you're not.
Mm,
He's like, if you go, you're gonna do your thing again. He's like,
right,
that you can't
right,
handle it. You can't handle it. It's too
right,
triggering for you. You
right,
don't know how to deal with it yet. And he was
right.
totally right, man. You know, and
How was that for you? How was that experience for you? And I mean that just that because that's a humbling experience, right?
yeah, yeah.
What was like? What was that like for you going through that?
Well, I'm self-will run riot, man. And
Yeah. Yep.
without the pain that
Yep.
these things, like, the pain brings me to my knees, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
it's been a gradual bringing to my knees. And I think I heard you say on your podcast, and I agree for myself, like, my best diseased egoic thinking
Yep.
just leads to more bottoms and pain.
Right.
It,
Right.
it might even look good on the outside because I can put on a mirage, right? I
Yep.
can make you think that I'm got it all together. And I was so wounded, and like that egomaniac with an inferiority complex, like, I was so insecure, but scared to death that you might get a hint that I'm insecure. So I had to
Mm-hmm.
pretend to be like the big shot because I was scared to death, but I didn't want you
Yeah.
to know I was scared to death. And when you're living in that delusion so long, like you said, driven by 100 forms of fear, self-pity, self-delusion, resentment, shame, guilt, blah, 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 blah. That's all I know, man. And I heard Lindsay mention, like, she had high-powered jobs, and she wanted another job. And
Yep.
I really related to that because that's kind of like me too. And I did it more because, like, I wanted that stuff to prove that to myself that I was worthy and good enough.
Yeah.
Because,
These and it's
yeah.
they're all devices, right? It's
Yep.
these are the devices that I use.
Yep.
Um, and something I don't know if they wrote it like this on purpose, but
Mm.
like since I'm an IT guy, I deal in logic and systems theory, right?
Mm.
When I read this on 62, they put it in a certain order, right? So, and I think it all stems from fear.
Mm.
Like you talked about
Mm.
that fear of inferiority, that fear for
Mhm.
me, fear of not being good enough,
Mhm.
fear that I'm incapable. Like at the those are like the core fears that I have,
Yeah.
and based on that fear, it creates a story,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
That fear drives my thinking in a way and influences my thinking in a self delusional way because I don't even know that I'm creating this story.
Right.
And once I'm in this self deluded thinking, I then take self seeking actions based upon that self deluded thinking,
Mm.
and now I'm actually manifesting that fear in my
Mhm.
life, right?
Mhm.
And it drives my behavior in a way that in the world is beautiful in that it responds to that, right? It
Mhm.
responds in it impacts my relationships. It impacts it impacts what like uh the trajectory of my life.
Mhm.
And then it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. Now I'm in this kind of creating my own hell, and now I'm in self-pity like the world is doing me wrong, right?
Mm.
Like, so when they
Mm.
put it in that order, I don't know if they did that on purpose, but for me, it just makes sense. And it's like now I'm living in this fear based reality,
Right.
and I think life is doing me an injustice.
Mm.
It's like I'm creating all this. Like, so really, when they say our problems are of our own making, it's like,
Mhm.
wow. And I never look at that fear, that inferiority. It drives everything.
Mhm. 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 Yeah, man. Totally. 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 And you make me think, like, that line, the man who does the same thing over and over again expects different results is
Mm-hmm.
a lunatic. Like, I am that lunatic.
Mm-hmm.
And there was that dude, I forget his name. He's from the Netherlands. He wrote a book, The Body Keeps the Score, about trauma. But
Mm.
in that book, he says they did a study on dogs, and they
Mm-hmm.
would electrocute these dogs, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And you heard this?
No, I haven't ever heard this.
Okay. So they electrocuted these dogs, and they did it, and the dogs got used to it. And then they
Right.
did one side of the room, they put the electricity, and
Yep.
one side of the room, like, delicious food and water.
Right.
The dogs hadn't been fed. The
Mm-hmm.
dogs went to the electricity because they're so used to the pain. They
Wow.
just they go with what they know.
Right.
And, like,
Right.
dude, that is so much part of like my disease. I'm
Yep.
so wired
Yep.
to be in the ego,
Right.
right? It takes bottoms. It takes pain to wake me up.
Mm-hmm.
Like I heard, I think it was you or your lady, you or Lindsay mentioned just that term normie, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I have some like different ideas on that word. Because sometimes I'll say, like, man, the normies got it easy, or they don't have, blah, 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 blah. But I think I heard you say, Ori, you said, I didn't want this thing. And I
Right.
related to that,
Yep.
man. Me too.
Yep.
The 12 step rooms are the last place on earth
Right.
I would ever want to be. And I
Yep.
kicking and screaming. Some people come in here and they're like, oh, I'm ready. I wasn't ready. Like I didn't like it from the beginning.
Yep.
I was like, I
Yep.
can teach. My ego was, I was so delusional. I was like, I can teach these people. I can show them. And meanwhile, I wasn't getting it,
Yep.
man. And guess what? That means more bottoms, more research and development, more pain.
Yeah.
And not because I'm bad, man, just because I was so blocked. Like I
Mm-hmm.
needed the pain to finally wake me up. And I don't know if you had this, bro. Like, step one, we admitted we were powerless over the addiction
Mm-hmm.
and our lives had become unmanageable.
Right. Right.
I
Those are two parts.
finally, at one point, I got the first part. I
Yep.
could say I was powerless over the addiction,
Yep.
but I didn't think my entire life was unmanageable and
Right. Me
insane.
too. I had the same experience. I
Okay.
didn't really understand that.
Yep.
I thought the food was the issue, right? I thought the food
Mm,
created the unmanageability, and
mm,
it does to a certain extent, right? It did
mm,
for me. It created a certain amount of unmanageability, but you take away the food, I'm still irritable, restless, and discontented. Why
mm,
is that? Why am I still prone to misery? Like, why is
mm,
it that I'm having trouble with relationships? Like, why
mm,
is it that I don't feel useful? Why is it that, you know, like, what am I? Why do I feel so like a hole?
mm,
Like there's a
mm,
void inside. Like, what is that all about? That has
mm,
nothing to do with the food. That was before the food.
mm,
So yeah, that
mm.
unmanageability piece is it's something deeper there.
Yeah, man. And it didn't take for me until I got that place where I finally could say,
Mm-hmm.
holy, like I had that moment of clarity. I had that moment where I said, holy crap,
Mm-hmm.
my entire life is insane and
Mm-hmm.
unmanageable. And they had been telling me that.
Mm-hmm.
Like I had people saying, like, yeah, you're probably going to go to jail or you're
Mm-hmm.
going to get divorced or your wife's going to leave you, or you're going to lose your, this, that, this. And it just didn't really penetrate,
Mm-hmm.
man,
Mm-hmm.
until it did. you
Mm-hmm.
know and that Ori, going back to your question, the guy who told me not to go to on that vacation,
Yeah.
when I had that, I called that man and I said this, and I had never said this to sponsors before. I said, please help me. I said, I'll do anything
Mm-hmm.
to get this thing.
Yes.
And I meant
Yes.
it, man. Right? I
Yep.
never
That's a
had that.
proper step one. Yep.
There you go. I never had that before. I
Right.
never had that. I wasn't broken, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I agree.
Woo.
And that's, you know, when I read Bill W.'s story
Mm,
and when he says alcohol had me licked,
mm,
that moment, that's like you can't, I couldn't create that moment for myself.
mm,
And it happens on a soul level where
mm,
in that when he says my scorecard read zero, you
mm,
know, not, I don't know. Sometimes I hear, people in recovery make it all rah, rah, rah. But when you really are at that point where you are left with no answers, it
mm,
is terrifying. It
mm,
is terrifying when I hit that point where I'm absolutely out of ideas and all my
mm,
thinking has failed me. It's like,
mm.
what else is there?
Right. Right.
That's a terrifying place to be.
Very terrifying. Well, yeah. So is that the incomprehensible demoralization? That's when like the drug doesn't work,
Mm-hmm.
and yet like, so it's like, but then like without the drug, you feel off too, right? Like, is that kind of what you're talking about?
It is more than the for me. It's more than the drug. It
Mm,
it's it's being at that place where like I couldn't wipe myself. I
Mm,
couldn't stand for more than 2 minutes. I couldn't wash my dishes. I'm
mm,
looking at I'm in filth in my
mm,
home. I can't leave.
mm,
Like everything in life, everything in life. Like my life isn't working on it. Like I have failed at life. At doing
mm,
like I can't do life.
mm,
It's more than like that's the thing, and not everybody get that. And that's why I have more compassion for people because not everybody hits that point.
mm-hmm,
Not everybody gets that place where it's scorched earth. I can't show up for work. I
mm,
can't show up for
mm,
family. I can't
mm,
do anything.
mm,
Not everybody gets to that place of scorched earth. You have
mm.
nothing.
That's really interesting as you say that. Because yeah, that's it. Because some people will say like you got to keep your step one never goes away. It gets deeper. Like,
Mm-hmm.
like it's not like so we don't have I'm not the power, right? I'm not the power. I'm not God, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like I'm not God. I think I'm God. My ego thinks it's God. I don't, but I learned that I'm not God, and I cannot run my own life. Um, and it's I lost my train of thought.
Yeah, I mean, so you were talking about that you're not God, right? Being in. So I think what you're referring to is that jumping off place.
Yes, thank you. Yes.
Um, it really is beyond words.
Mm, yes.
I feel so. It's like you have to experience that, and it's hard to describe it because I think it's bespoke to each individual, right?
Mm,
In how they reach that jumping off place. And I've
mm,
heard it said before, it's like jumping off a cliff and hoping that you grab the wing of a eagle flying by.
mm,
Like I just love that visual because it was like that for me.
mm,
It was like,
mm,
okay, I'm jumping off this cliff. I don't know. I hope that there's something I can grab onto because I'm
mm,
out. I'm
mm,
out.
mm.
And so in your experience, do you feel like that's happened multiple
Yeah.
times, or was it a one time? What was it? What was your experience with that?
Yeah. So I felt like in the beginning it happened progressively, and that guy who was probably at that point
Mm-hmm.
maybe one, two, three, four, five, maybe like the sixth sponsor. But
Mm-hmm.
that's when I had the second part of step one. And that's
Mm-hmm.
where I felt the broken point. And that's when I felt, man, and I had a very high powered corporate job, but
Mm-hmm.
I just like broke down.
Mm-hmm.
And my wife did an intervention on me. She
Mm-hmm.
printed off like 50 stress factors and she
Mm-hmm.
circled 48 of them. And
Mm-hmm.
she's like, "You're gonna die. I need to take you to a hospital. Like you
Mm-hmm.
have all of these things." And
Mm-hmm.
when the doctor put me off work for just a couple weeks,
Mm-hmm.
like first the adrenaline was so high, so it didn't hit me. But I'd say like somewhere 4, 5, 6 days, when the adrenaline came down, I felt completely broken. And then
Mm-hmm.
I was like, I can't even like if I went to McDonald's and they hired me to like, and they're like, dude, your only job is to take these potatoes and just throw them the French fries in the oil. And then you pull them up when the beeper goes off. Like I didn't feel I could do that. I just
Mm-hmm.
like every part of me felt broken. That's when I called that guy with
Ooh.
that desperation, you know?
But
And
but but so
yeah.
so this is the thing. What because I'm sure that you had many ominous warnings up until that point,
I did.
right?
I did.
I mean, this is you just said this is your sixth sponsor,
Yep.
right? So, and I'm sure your wife was dropping nuggets, and
Oh
you
yeah.
life was giving you clear examples of why you need a better solution than yourself. Like, what was that's the thing that I think I will spend the rest of my life trying to study is why this moment
Yeah.
did something click for you.
Oh, well, dude, that's what so I think we started with it. I think the ego. is so cunning, baffling, and powerful
Mm-hmm.
that only the pain, like look at Bill's story, man. This
Yep.
this strikes me so much when I read that story.
Yep.
Like how many times in that story, like you're rooting for Bill, you're like, all right,
Yep.
man, don't blow this business deal.
Right.
Like just don't screw this one up. And he
Right.
screws it up. And he
Yep.
screws it up. Why? Because he's
Mm.
out of control.
Yes.
And it has to get worse and worse and worse and worse. And like an intervention from Ebby to come visit him, right? Like, I don't know, dude. Like, it's like but I always think like let's say Bill got it earlier. Let's say instead of like what the book might describe, all these drunken episodes, I don't know how many it shares in his story. Let's say there were 10. Let's say
Mm-hmm.
he got it after the second one. Maybe he would have never started the program.
Yeah.
So I believe the higher power, you can use all this stuff. And I mean, ultimately it's a gift of grace, right? Like, I don't know. Like I'll tell you this, Ori, like first, like in my delusion, like I got some traction in the program, but
Mm-hmm.
I lost the job and I said to myself, then I finally got this real big job and it was a high paying job, a powerful position. And my ego said, this is why it all happened. Like if I never lost
Wow.
my job,
Wow.
I would have never had these problems. And I'll never
Wow.
forget, dude. I was living
Oh,
in Southern California, driving to Northern California for this job.
oh
I
my
met a dude.
God.
I met a dude in the program
Yep.
on the drive up, right,
Yep.
dude?
Mm-hmm.
He told my wife, he goes, he needs to get to meetings there. He needs to get a
Wow.
sponsor. He's not out of the woods, right?
Right.
And he goes, I'm flying up there. I'm going to take him to his first meeting. And he
Right.
did. He did. And I did go, but it wasn't the number one priority. Like my first sponsor I ever had in these programs, he said, if you really have this thing,
Yep.
like anything you put above this, you're going to lose your God, your job, your wife, your kids. Um, and that is true, man. Like, that is like in my experience, I see that that's true. Um,
That's why it's scary too.
very
Like
scary.
it's so
Very scary.
scary because
Yes.
I think even, in recovery, if, as you progress in recovery, at least as I progressed in recovery, there's been many fuzzy red slipper moments where out comes the fuzzy red slippers, like, where, that twist of thinking happens where
Mm,
somehow I got this.
mm, mm,
Somehow, oh, this is not as bad as I think, or, oh, I can get distracted and something else becomes the priority. Oh, it's the big job. Oh, that's why all this happened. Oh,
mhm,
I'm good. This whole idea of I'm good now.
mhm. Yes. And
Right.
that's what I was trying to say, and I forgot. What I
Yep.
was trying to say about step one is
Yep.
I call it giving step one the middle finger.
Mm-hmm.
Like, because
Mm-hmm.
think about this, through my weakness and powerlessness and
Mm-hmm.
total unmanageability,
Mm-hmm.
I get the gift of step two, step three. So I get a power. It's not
Yep.
my power,
Yep.
and it works through my powerlessness.
Yep.
But here's what the ego does: the
Right.
ego starts making me think it's really my power again, and I
Right.
lose it all. You
Right.
see?
Right.
Because
Yeah.
step one never goes away.
Right.
And Ori, I did this for the last 14 months. I won't get into it, but I will say my delusional thinking was like, you know what? Maybe literally, dude, like I've been in this thing, I've been in recovery 14 years, but it was like, you know what? Maybe I made this a little bit too big of
Yep.
it because I got so much healthy. Like,
Mm-hmm.
in other words, I got so healthy, you think my gratitude would grow, and it
Right.
did grow, but I stopped. But it's so cunning. It got in there and snuck in, and it said, calm down a little bit. Just calm down. And guess what? I did, and nothing bad happened for a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
Nothing bad happened. Nothing bad happened. Nothing bad happened until boom, I get in a fight with my wife, and I do something that I hadn't done in like 6 years,
Mm-hmm.
and it's like, whoa, like, whoa, something's off. I'm off. And my ego, and I go to meetings and I'm irritated at this person and I don't like what that person's
Yeah.
sharing,
And you
right?
start to feel it. Mm-hmm.
Yep. And
Yep, and that connects back to what you're saying.
yep.
When you mention that you can start to feel it in your body,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And yeah, so there are some people. in my food program that use the food as a barometer for where they're at spiritually. I mean, I
Mm.
don't personally subscribe to that. I think that's still using, or at least in my recovery, that's using.
Oh,
But
explain that, Ori. Explain what you mean by that. That's really interesting.
so you'll in look, so I had the brand of recovery where I would use words like, "Oh, my food got a little wonky,"
Yeah.
or
Yeah.
I ate a little bit more than I should last night, but here's the recovery.
Yeah.
And I would use language like that. But really what I was saying, like looking back, is I was still using food.
Mm.
I was still using food to take the edge off.
Mm.
So now I have the brand of recovery where there's clear guidelines around what I can eat, how much of it I can eat. And
Mm.
having those clear, big, bold lines around that and having a food plan that I follow and weighing and measuring, what it's done for me is it's really delineated what my body needs from
Mm.
what's happening in my addiction, right? So food is no longer a barometer for I never get a chance to act out, right? So when I'm in those states where I want to use, it's very clear. And because it's really clear in that way, the unmanageability is really clear
Mm.
because I'm no
Mm.
longer acting out. I'm no longer using food
Mm.
to pacify or obfuscate, the unmanageability that's happening in my brain.
Wow.
Um, is that
Wow.
did I explain that like clearly?
Yes. And I need to tell you that I I need to do that more
Mhm.
because I as soon as I get traction, I look for the loophole, I look for the wiggle room.
Right, right.
And
And see that so
yes.
that so and that's the thing. That's the that if you're using,
Mm,
you never get to a place of why am I looking for a loophole? Like why am I looking for extra? My food
mm,
plan says 1 cup of rice.
mm,
That was good for the last 3 days.
mm,
Like,
mm,
why am I trying to look for the loophole? Oh, maybe I
mm,
can pack more into the cup, or maybe like what is it that's driving that? Like,
mm,
why am I seeking ease and comfort in extra? Like, that's
mm,
the question, right? Why?
mm,
What's the cause and condition of that? As long as I can, as long as my food gets bigger or whatever, I'll never get to that why of finding the pain point.
mm, mm,
So yeah, that's I don't know what I was saying before that, but like that's the way I view it. My
mm.
food sobriety, it's hardcore.
Yeah. I like that. I like that, man. And hopefully, when you go through your podcast, you'll get into that because you already got a fan in me. Have you published your first episode yet?
No, no, not yet. I'm
Okay.
I'm I'm still in that phase where I'm just getting the reps in.
Sure, sure. And when you do, I'd love for you to come back on and and also like when we publish this episode, when you do finally publish it, I'll go back and add your link to my
Awesome.
show. Yeah, yeah, totally, man. Totally. And yeah, tell us so what are your plans? And I'm sure it's going to continue to evolve, but it sounds like what I gather, you're going through the big book,
Yeah,
like you're going to give your own unique experience and give your
right,
experience strength and hope, you and Lindsay.
right.
And yeah, is that kind of like the gist or what else are you thinking?
I just want to get my story out there.
Yeah.
Um, the feedback that I receive is that uh my story is impactful and profound.
Yeah.
What's happened to me and what's continuing to happen.
Right.
The feedback that I receive is that I have ability to articulate it in a way that resonates with people,
Yes.
and I just want to get my story out there, and I just want to start getting content out there for people to listen to, and I don't know, it's just really on my heart right now. I just want to get it out there and see what happens.
Yeah, man, you do have that gift. I mean, I'm going to share some, and if you don't want this on the podcast, let me know and I'll delete it out. But I saw Ori give a presentation on the stops at a retreat, and it was very powerful. And definitely you have some kind of a gift. And so I'm so glad you're doing this, because I mean, I always say, man, like if these things help one other person, it's great.
Yeah,
You know,
exactly.
it don't have
Exactly.
to be, whatever it turns out to be is what it turns out to be. But I don't know, man. I love talking recovery. I love the 12 steps. It saved my life and continues to save my life. And
I
I'm
can hear the
not perfect
passion.
at it,
Yeah,
right?
I can
I'm
hear the
not a
passion though.
guru. Yeah, go ahead. What'd you say, Ori?
I said I can hear your passion.
Yeah, and I'm not a guru, man. Like I make mistakes all the time, and I don't do it as well as I want to all the time. But my higher power is gracious to me, and I'm learning. I'm learning, and I don't know. The tough thing about for me, man, is like having like an addictive personality. That actually kept me out of many of the rooms, because I was like,
Mm-hmm.
well, I don't know if I really have that, because I do
Mm-hmm.
this, and then I could stop one and really do another one.
Mm-hmm.
And so
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, oh, see, I don't really have a problem with that.
Mm-hmm.
But the truth is, no, I have a problem with all these things. And not all of them, but a lot of them. And that can be tricky in and of itself. What I've had to do with that is like think about, out of all of them, what's my primary one?
Yeah,
Like
which one is
what's
killing you the fastest?
yes. And I'll tell you, man, here's a mistake I made. Um, because I got to such a good place with that primary one,
Yeah.
I started pulling back with the idea, which this sounds good. I said, you know what? It's the onion. Let me go deeper in the onion. Let me go deeper into ACA, deeper into, the inner child, deeper, which is all good in my opinion. But here's the problem. I took my foot off the accelerator with the primary.
Mm,
And what I
mm,
learned, Ori, is never again.
mm,
Because like I'll build with one hand and I'm getting destroyed in the back door. And
mm,
what's the point, right? Like
mm.
if I have a home and I'm building the front of my home really, really nice, but the
Right.
back
Right.
I'm letting in like, this like terrorist military to come destroy, like I just leave that door. Like that doesn't make any sense.
Right.
And
Yeah, I get that.
yeah. Go ahead.
Yeah, my sponsor really helped me with that because like as I progressed in recovery, like you, I discovered other areas where I was taking the edge off.
Mm,
And he encouraged me to get help. But he said he always reminded me, he was like, whatever you do in those other areas, he was like, the food doesn't change.
right.
Right. And that's our way of saying that, yeah, you can have all these other experiences and you can have all these other growth opportunities, but at the end of the day, you know, if you fall short in those other areas, in those secondary addictions, it the number one addictions, like you can maintain that, you maintain. So, that helped me in this sense because it was like no matter what I was doing in my other, programs and not showing up to the best standard there, it didn't impact my food sobriety.
That's
Like
beautiful.
that's
Because I
number
would
one.
ask you, would you agree that, let's say you hit a touchdown, like hit the Super Bowl and all those other areas, but you took your foot off the food one, it would all self-destruct, right?
Yeah, that's not even. I even think like again going back to protect the baby, right? It, I've given up other programs,
Mm,
you know,
mm, yes.
and like the food one is a non-negotiable. Like it is
Mm,
non-negotiable. That's the
mm,
baby I'm protecting at all times. That's
mm,
my foundation.
mm, mm.
Yeah. So thank you,
Awesome,
brother.
man.
Thank you, brother. I appreciate
Thank
this.
you so much, man. It was great to have you. And
Yeah,
I thank you for your time and hope to have you on again.
absolutely. And I hope to have you on mine in the
Oh, it would
future.
be a joy, man. Be a joy. I would love it. I would
All
love
right,
it.
brother.
Thanks so much, my friend.
Take it
Appreciate you.
easy. Yep.
All right, brother.
Bye
Blessings.
bye.
Bye bye.
Thank you for listening to Serenity is Addictive. Until the next time we meet, keep trudging your road to happy destiny. Hey.